That's a good question. There was a lot of things that we didn't expect initially when we got into this. When we discovered the money laundering, we figured just report it to the service desk at the Watchtower headquarters, and it'll be handled. It'll be taken care of. What we didn't realize is that we were actually reporting this to the very people that were involved. And so once they realized that we understood how the money laundering connected to the remodeling projects and Kingdom Hall merges, that's kind of when the gates of hell opened up, and after that it was just a frantic, chaotic, frenetic, whatever way you want to describe it. They were doing anything and everything to try to stop us, and we didn't expect that. We didn't expect to have our phones tapped. We didn't expect to be followed around town. We didn't expect to be threatened. We didn't expect to be intimidated. We didn't expect to be labeled apostates. We didn't expect an effort being made to try to turn the whole world against us. And all we were saying was, here, we discovered something. And we were just, what we thought, basically cleaning out the money changers in the synagogue, so to speak. And in the opposite, it was just they looked at us as being this threat. And that's when we had begun to realize, and most people won't believe this, but there's a very sinister side to the Watchtower. You won't know this unless you run afoul of them, or you happen to discover some secret that they don't want the public to know, and they will do anything to keep their secrets. And we didn't expect to have our cell phone messages read. We didn't expect have our emails read. And I tell people this, and they look at me and they're like, "Oh, this is the Watchtower. They don't do these kinds of things." And I'm like, "Yeah, they do." If you have an email address at any of the big three, Google, Yahoo, or Hotmail, they have witnesses who work for these companies. And if they want to know who you're emailing or what you're saying in their emails, they just make a phone call and say, "Hey, brother so-and-so, can you get us copies of these emails from this address? We believe that there's something going on, and we want to keep the congregation clean, and we can't explain to you what it's all about, but just trust us and get us this information." And the average Jehovah's Witness will do it without questioning, never realizing that he's actually making himself an accessory to, whatever illegalities could be going on. So there were a lot of considerations. We didn't expect to be followed around town. There was one particular incident where Arlen St. Clair was having a cup of coffee at a random cafe, and in walks Alan Lee and Lawrence Lee. And Arlen said, "How did you know I was here?" And they said, "Oh, well, we know your routine, and we can get to you anytime we want to." And that's pretty sinister, And you don't think of the Watchtower as being that way, but there's a very dark side to it. And we didn't expect them to have political connections. They claim to be no part of this world, but yet they've developed a very, very strong working relationship with the world. We didn't expect them to be able to manipulate the police department. There was an investigation into the identity theft, and Patterson, the Watchtower headquarters in Patterson, made one phone call, and that was it. The police department said, "We're not going to make an arrest, and this investigation is shut down." And we had filed various cases, which they were all dismissed, and the premise was, "Oh, well, you don't have any evidence." And so this was the belief. Everybody thought, "Oh, well, they don't have a case. They don't have any evidence." The reality was we had all kinds of evidence. They just pulled strings and got the cases dismissed. And you tell people this, and the first thing that they tell you is, "Oh, you're crazy. This is a Watchtower. They don't do things like this." But, yeah, they do. And it's very much like dealing with the mafia. And I didn't expect that. None of us expected that. We didn't expect the Watchtower to operate like the mafia. And it has been a very eye-opening experience. But it's a little scary to know that something that on the outside looks very inviting and very family orientated and very on the up and up, there's a dark side to it. And I can recall what one gentleman said, and he summed it up best. And he basically said, I've watched this situation from the very beginning. And he said, all I've seen is the Watchtower has spent the last 2 years kicking and screaming and trying to do everything to keep from going to court against a couple of guys that don't even have a lawyer. And then he said, that either means one of two things. Either these guys have really good evidence, or the Watchtower already knows it's guilty. And that was like the most profound statement I ever read. But it's true. It sums it up perfectly. And that's what this situation is about. You know, we stumbled across something that we didn't know what we stumbled across. And once we figured it out and tried to do the right thing, then all of a sudden it was just open season on us. And they've tried to make us look crazy. They've tried to tell people we're renegade, out of control apostates, and we're enemies against Jehovah. And, you know, we're trying to attack the Watchtower. Hey, this isn't about anything spiritual. This is just about, we discovered money laundering. We discovered crime. That's it. That has nothing to do with the Bible. It's just, this is what we discovered. And we tried to do the right thing. And, you know, like I said, the proverbial gates of hell just opened right up. Now, the very first clue that we got that led to the discovery of the money laundering, the very first clue that we got came from Bruce Raditich. And we've talked about Bruce Raditich before, so I won't get into that. But it was actually something that Bruce Raditich said in a conversation with various parties that actually led to the discovery of the money trail, so to speak. Bruce Raditich was having a conversation with two individuals, and in that conversation, Mr. Raditich had stated that Arlen Meyer, he's a retired traveling overseer. Mr. Meyer was forced to resign, and that's something that's not public knowledge, and I'm not going to get into the mechanics behind why he was forced to resign. We'll cover that another time, but most people don't know this. They think he just got to the end of his tenure and just resigned, but he was basically forced to step down. So when the advent of his retirement came, most circuit overseers retire to a specific trailer park that has been called Circuit City. They call it Circuit City because there's more retired circuit overseers that live there than anywhere else in the country. But during the course of this conversation, Mr. Raditich had told two individuals that Arlen Meyer had purchased his trailer, his mobile home, and that the cost of the mobile home was $79,000. Bruce Raditich basically said that Arlen Meyer paid for the trailer himself and that he paid for it in cash. And that was the very first thing that kind of let me know that something was way wrong. Because if you are a circuit overseer or a district overseer or a traveling overseer or anything like that, you of course have to take a vow of poverty. So the question that I had to ask was, if Arlen Meyer had taken a vow of poverty, how could this man be able to purchase a $79,000 trailer and pay cash for it? That would be impossible. If you've taken a vow of poverty, there's no way that he would have been able to save up $79,000. And the logic is this: if he was willing to spend $79,000, he's not going to spend all the money he has, logically. So you have to figure if he's willing to spend $79,000, he probably had $150,000 saved up or somewhere. Which then goes back to my original question of how could a traveling overseer who's taking a vow of poverty have this kind of money? And not only did he pay cash for this mobile home, he was also reimbursed for the full amount of the mobile home by the service desk. And this is what Mr. Raditich had told these two individuals in this conversation. And one of the individuals basically informed me. And that was kind of the catalyst that made me realize there's either some very creative money management going on here, or there's something else going on. And it was actually this information that came from Mr. Raditich himself that actually kind of got the wheels turning and made me realize that there was something else going on with the money, so to speak. The old expression, follow the money. And that's what I basically started to do, because I realized there's absolutely no way that a circuit overseer who has taken a vow of poverty would be able to save up $79,000 to be able to purchase a mobile home and then be reimbursed that amount by the service desk. Basically, the Watchtower headquarters paid him the money back. And this information came straight from Bruce Raditich himself. And I had spoken to this individual who was a part of this conversation with Mr. Raditich, and we were having a cup of coffee, and it was like a light went on in the back of my head, and I realized, wait a minute. You know, this guy paid $79,000 in cash for a mobile home, and he's a traveling overseer. It's just not possible. And that was kind of the catalyst and the very first inkling that I had that something was off. And this information came from Bruce Raditich himself. And he was trying, the way it was conveyed to me, he was having this conversation with these two other individuals, and he was kind of trying to impress them, is what it was. And they filed it away in the back of their mind and, forgot about it until I had a cup of coffee with this gentleman, and this person told me, and it had kind of connected the dots for some other stuff that I was working on, and I thought, aha. I sat them down in the very beginning, and they came to me excuse me, and they said, this is what we want to do. And I sat them down and I said, I want you to think about this very carefully. You do understand if you do this, you'll be interpreted as being, going against the Watchtower and going against all that you have believed in all your life. I said, that's not what you're going to be doing, but that's how it'll be perceived. And I said, I want you to really think about this. I said, it's not something to take lightly. And I wasn't trying to talk them out of it. I wanted them to understand the gravity of what they wanted to do. Because they had gone everywhere. They had gone to the district attorney, they had gone to the police department, they had gone to the attorney general, they had gone to the FBI, they had gone everywhere, with documents in hand and saying, this is what we discovered. They were just whistleblowers. They found crime, they found, a money trail, and they just thought, let's put this in the hands of the authorities and they'll handle it. And what we discovered is everybody wants a job, but nobody wants to work. And the complicated issue is, because religions are protected under the First Amendment, which basically says there has to be a separation between church and state, the government technically can't investigate a religious organization. So there's a lot of protection that the Watchtower has to hide behind. The only way the government can investigate a religious organization is if there's crime. And so I sat them down and I said, now you need to think really hard about this. I said, what you need to understand is, if you go through this door, there will be no turning back. And you'll be walking into a world of trouble. And they both sat there and they said, we want to do this. And I remember sitting there and thinking quietly under my breath, oh shit. I could see their conviction. They weren't gonna back down. They weren't gonna back up. They weren't gonna back away. This was their choice, and they had thought long and hard about this, clearly. And I told them, I said, I want you to think about this. Take a minute. I said, because you have to keep in mind, I said, if you go through this door, you will be walking into a world of trouble. And there'll be no turning back. And they looked at me and they looked at each other for a split second. And then they looked back at me and they said, we've already thought about it. And we want to do this. And we just want to expose this, because we went everywhere. We went to the FBI, we went to the police department, and nobody wanted to touch this because, this is a religious organization. And the Watchtower has very aggressive lawyers. And they smile and they're pleasant people and they claim to be Christians and all this good stuff, but they will come after you in ways that you have not even begun to imagine. And they weren't aware of that. I had already done a bit of research in previous cases that the Watchtower was involved in, and I thought this is going to become a real bumpy ride. There's going to be a lot of turbulence. And, I didn't have a problem. I'm not one of Jehovah's Witnesses. No skin off my nose. But for them, I wanted them to really understand the full gravity of what they were walking into. And they didn't blink. They didn't hesitate. They didn't, there was no fear. And I said, you could be walking away from the only life that you've ever known. And they both looked at me and they said, if that's what it takes to expose, this corruption that we found within the organization, then we'll do it. And I just thought, damn, got balls bigger than Arizona.